I am Steve Rohde, proud to be chair of ICUJP, founded 25 years ago under the motto that religious communities must stop blessing war and violence. A motto that is as true today as it ever was, and we're grateful for everybody joining us. So we're very grateful everyone is here, and we begin every Friday morning, and we've been at this. I think the math is about 1,250 webinars every Friday morning for 25 years, with a few days off for holidays. And we depend on the kindness of friends and strangers and new friends. So, in the link that you got to come here today, there's a donation link. And we would appreciate you being as generous as you can in giving us some financial support. We have a small paid part-time staff. We struggle to make ends meet so that we can put on events like this, as well as public events. We're planning some major things surrounding the 4th of July. And then every year we have our annual George Regas Courageous Peacemaker Awards in September. This is a big one celebrating our 25th anniversary. So we know you have many demands on your resources, and we hope you can make ICUJP one of your top causes. Anything that you can give will help us keep going. And we're working on our dreams, and I'm so pleased to introduce Anthony Manousos, our speaker for today. His official bio is in the materials that you got, and I would encourage him, even though he knows many of the people on the screen, to talk about his personal journey that has brought him to this work and the spirituality that is behind all of it. Anthony is co-founder of Making Housing Work. I think I garbled
Making
that.
housing and community happen.
Right, making it's happen, making it happen, ing. So without further garbled introduction, Anthony Manousos.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you all. Greg, you and I are in the same wavelength. I'm also from New Jersey, and I don't care what people think too. So we are a state with a state attitude. Um, and the state song is "Born to Run," and so here I am in California. You mentioned uh, the song "Study War No More," and that's actually from the prophet Micah, which is the motto for making housing and community happen.
Ah,
I'm not gonna. I'm gonna actually take the risk of singing this song. I'm Everyone neath their vine and fig tree will live in peace and unafraid. Everyone neath their vine and fig tree will live in peace and unafraid. And into plowshares turn their swords. Nation shall learn war no more. So that is the motto of our organization. And it's interesting that it combines two things that are important to us. One is ending war, and the other is secure housing for everybody. And the two really go together. So um, I like to share with you a slide presentation that kind of explains our work. But for me, my journey really on affordable housing started 16 years ago when I married Jill Shook. And Jill has been passionate about affordable housing for over 20 years. And we formed a nonprofit together called Making Housing Happen, Making Housing and Community Happen. Her book is called Making Housing Happen, Faith-Based Affordable Housing Models. And when I married Jill 15 years ago, I helped her edit a revised version of this book, which is all about what churches are doing to have affordable housing built on their on their land. And that's something that we are involved with in our organization. So my topic today is going to be California's affordable housing crisis, causes, impacts, and solutions. Now, this is a huge topic, so I'm just going to give you an overview and of some of the things that are causing the crisis and some of the things that we're doing about it. But before I do, I want to introduce our organization. Many of you know something about it, but let me just fill you all in. Making Housing and Community Happen was started here in Pasadena about 7 years ago. We're a small nonprofit, but we have big dreams and we've accomplished a lot over the past 7 years. Our mission is to equip congregations, community leaders, and neighbors with practical tools needed to transform their communities, to end homelessness, and to stabilize the cost of housing through education, advocacy, organizing, and advisement. So that's our goal. And we accomplish that through our educational work. We have housing justice forums. There's going to be one next week online. We've had affordable housing bus tours. We've taken elected officials and community leaders on tours of our city so they can see for themselves what affordable housing is like and to hear the testimony of people whose lives have been transformed by affordable housing. That's actually the best way to change people's hearts and minds. There's a lot of prejudices about affordable housing, but when people see for themselves what it's like and they hear from people who've been changed by it, that's what really makes a difference. Jill, my wife, also conducts one-day housing justice institutes. And these are kind of transformational workshops, not just informational. She brings together key religious and community leaders in a particular city and develops this one-day institute where they learn about affordable housing, they learn about the biblical basis for the work, and they learn how to be organizers. And the goal is for the group to form a team like the one we have in Pasadena to advocate for affordable housing. And that's been very successful. We do a lot of advocacy, and I'll talk a little bit about some of our successes. We focus a lot on organizing churches. We feel that they have a lot of clout in the community. They have a lot of moral authority, and leaders are inclined to listen when they know that the churches are taking a stand. And then we also do community organizing, particularly in an area of Pasadena called North Fair Oaks. It was once a Black Main Street, but because of gentrification and the hollowing out of the Black community due to racist policies, that community has been neglected. And we've been organizing in that community for the last 10 years, and we've had quite a bit of success in getting the city to pay attention to this neighborhood. And recently, this week, we had a very significant victory at the Planning Commission, and they agreed that the area that we're working in should be called the Black Legacy District to honor the history of that neighborhood and also to institute policies that would help to revitalize this neighborhood economically. Some of our successes included advocating for safe parking to be permitted at church sites in Pasadena. Trinity Lutheran Church started a safe parking program with us, and so far 16 parkers from this program have been housed. The Pasadena Housing Department also secured $1.3 million grant to create an additional safe parking program at All Saints Episcopal Church for 25 safe parkers. And I should say this is not just allowing people to, in their cars to sleep in the parking lot. This is also providing case management and other support services so that people living in their cars can become permanently housed. This is a great program, but it was very, very strongly resisted by the NIMBYs near the Episcopal Church. We also advocated successfully for SB 4, and this is a very important bill that rezones religious land statewide and makes it easier for congregation to have affordable housing on their underutilized land. We initiated this bill and we're part of a coalition of 300 organizations that supported it, signed into law in 2023. This opens up thousands of acres of land throughout the state for affordable housing, and many churches have uh, huge parking lots and dwindling congregations. They're struggling, and affordable housing can be a lifeline for the church and a way for them to benefit the community. And then in 2024, we advocated for workforce housing for teachers and staff on a closed uh, Pasadena Unified School District campus. And that was a long struggle. A lot of these struggles we're talking about took years to come to fruition. And this one here with the workforce housing on school land was a campaign that was started 10 years ago. I mentioned One Day Housing Justice Institutes. This year we organized or launched a nonprofit called the Congregational Land Partners, which is a team of experts that provides advisement to congregations that want to have affordable housing built on their land. We started this as a committee about 6 years ago. About 100 churches have approached us, and we're helping uh, uh, them to find to really to visualize what's possible on their property, and then to be able to approach uh, the appropriate developer so that they can realize their vision. And we're very aware that as churches struggle and they're on the verge of closing, they're often taken advantage of by developers. And our goal is to make sure that they get a fair deal. And finally, I mentioned the Black Legacy District. We're really excited that um, the Black community in Pasadena is getting the recognition that they deserve. And not just that, but we're also working on reparations, which I'll talk about later. Our priorities for this year is advocating to prioritize affordable housing for those who've been displaced. We have a local preference policy that sets aside 20% of new affordable housing for those displaced from Pasadena in the last decade. And this is something we advocated. And we're trying to expand that policy to also include people a bit displaced by the fires in Altadena. And then we're supporting those seeking reparations and affordable housing for those affected by the 710 stub. This was a freeway project that destroyed a vibrant Black neighborhood and displaced nearly 3,000 people, mostly people of color. Now, Caltrans has restored those 50 acres to the city of Pasadena. It's a huge piece of land, and the city's really excited about having an opportunity to develop it for housing and businesses. And we want to make sure that the people who have been displaced and affected receive reparations, and we're working with other groups in the city to do that. And I'm very proud of our city for taking this racial justice issue very seriously. I mentioned our congregational land partners and the others. Okay, so let me start by just a simple definition, because a lot of people are a little bit confused about what is affordable housing. What does that really mean? Well, the definition of affordability is if you're paying less than 30% of your household income on housing, then that housing is affordable to you. If you have to pay more than 30%, then it's not really affordable. And over 50% of California renters exceed this threshold. So we need about 4 million affordable units in California. That's how big the gap is. The median home prices in California are about double the national average. Since 2000, rents have risen 44%, and incomes have risen only 11%. So about 70% of low-income renters are cost burdened. Now, people who are cost burdened, severely cost burdened, are paying 50% or more on of their income on housing. And that means they have to cut back on healthcare, food, education, and it's quite serious. Jill, my wife, started a tutoring program called STARS here in Pasadena, and was helping low income, mostly Latino families, uh, helping their kids to get tutoring that they needed. But what actually really helped them the most educationally was when Jill was able to place these families into affordable housing. And when parents didn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs to pay the rent, and when kids had a room of their own, their academic performance improved dramatically, and many of them went on to college. So housing is really important on so many levels. Um, about 60% of California renters face unstable housing. The possibility of evictions and frequent moves undermine family stability and children's learning. Um, Again, the cost of housing has gone up 44%, and income's only 11%, and this has been a hardship for many families. So that's the problem of affordability. So what are some solutions? Well, one solution is housing choice vouchers, formerly called Section 8, for those who income qualify. In this program, recipients pay 1/3 of their income on rent, and the government pays the rest. Now, if we believe that housing is a human right, like the right to eat and the right to education, and there's a shortage of affordable housing for low income people, it makes sense to provide housing vouchers to everyone who income qualifies, as the sociologist Matthew Desmond argues. However, only about 25% of those who apply and are eligible for vouchers receive them. And this is quite a hardship. Even when people wait 5 years, sometimes longer, to get a Section 8 voucher, about half of them don't even find housing because landlords won't accept the Section 8 voucher, or there's other issues. So it's really a lottery system that benefits a few people and makes a big difference in their lives. But this program needs to be expanded. Another solution is rent control. And rent control really stabilizes rents and helps tenants to stay housed affordably. Um, and we also need anti-rent gouging laws. We have one in California that limits the rise of rents to 10%. But landlords are getting around this by charging a lot of extra fees, charging for parking, charging for various other things that used to be just part of the what was given when you bought it, when you rented an apartment. So landlords are always trying to get away, try to find ways to gouge their tenants. Pasadena successfully passed Measure H, which changed the city charter so we could have rent stabilization or rent control. But now landlords are trying to undermine this measure with a new ballot initiative. So the battle goes on. By the way, the rent control campaign in Pasadena, it took 3 tries to pass rent control, 3 tries. And it required hundreds of volunteers, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and finally we were able to have 15,000 authorized, validated signatures, and we needed 13,000. So that was a successful campaign, and I think we got about 54%, I think, of the voters supported it. But our city council members didn't, by the way. Our mayor was adamantly opposed to rent control, and so were most of the city council members. But after rent control passed and the renters realized that they had some uh, power, we now have about 3 or 4 members of our council who are pro tenant and pro rent control. Another solution is to subsidize the uh, construction of affordable housing through something called tax credits. And tax credits are the preferred way right now of funding affordable housing. It's not a direct subsidy from the government. Instead, corporations can choose to put some of their tax obligation into a fund for affordable housing, and then affordable housing developers apply for these funds. It's very competitive, and that helps to subsidize affordable housing. Um, there have been about 1,000 units produced through tax credits in our city, including Heritage Square South, shown here. And I'll say a little more about that later. Another approach is for the government to directly fund affordable housing. And this is what happens in Vienna, Austria, and used to happen here in the United States until the Reagan era. And this method is called social housing sometimes. And it's a lot simpler and more direct than funding through tax credits. Um, Another way to fund affordable housing is something called a transfer tax. A transfer tax is paid when a property is sold. And Los Angeles voters approved a transfer tax called ULA for property sold for 5 million or more. And this is sometimes called a mansion tax. And it's generated hundreds of millions of dollars for affordable housing. However, ULA has also depressed housing production and resulted in fewer deed-restricted affordable units being built, which is an unintended negative consequence. So efforts are being made to fix ULA's flaws, such as exempting new construction and imposing a tax only on properties 15 years old or more. I should add that the Jarvis anti-tax people are putting an initiative on the ballot that would make it almost impossible for cities to have transfer taxes. Um, Another way to have affordable housing is through inclusionary zoning. And this requires developers to set aside a percentage of new housing as affordable, often in exchange for a density bonus that makes the project pencil out. Here in Pasadena, we've had inclusionary for about, I think, 15 years, and it was originally 15% of units had to be set aside as affordable. Now it's 20%. Um, Developers also have the option of um, building units off-site or paying a fee. And many developers in the past have paid fees, and these fees can be used to uh, provide seed money for affordable housing. I think our program in Pasadena raised about $35 million in they call them in lieu fees. In lieu of building the units, you pay this fee. The beauty of inclusionary is it spreads affordable housing at no cost all over the city, and this furthers fair housing. Typically, affordable housing is built in low-income neighborhoods because property values are cheaper. You can buy land more cheaply, and there's less opposition. But with inclusionary, uh, affordable housing units are built in luxury apartments all over the city. And that's a great policy. And this policy, again, has produced over 1,000 affordable units in Pasadena. Some of the things that raise the cost of housing are zoning restrictions. Single family zoning dominates 75% of residential land, limiting high density development, affordable housing options. We'll say more about that. Compliance costs, environmental design regulations also raise the cost of housing. And sometimes CEQA, the Environmental Protection Act, is weaponized to oppose housing, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Permitting deadlines, it can take 18 months or more to get the permits needed to build housing, and especially difficult for affordable housing developers because they're competing for different funding sources like tax credits. And there are time limits and deadlines. And the longer the delay, the harder it is to put all that money together. Same is true for market rate developers. The longer they wait, the more they're stuck paying taxes and other costs on the property that they purchased. So permitting delays is a problem, and that's why streamlining regulations and permitting can reduce barriers, encourage higher density development, and improve affordability. Okay, moving on to NIMBYs, another problem that causes our housing to be more expensive. If you look at this slide, you'll see on the left a notice that was sent out to homeowners here in Pasadena not too long ago, about 3 weeks ago, when they heard that there was affordable housing being built in East Pasadena. And East Pasadena has been resistant to affordable housing for a long time. There's actually just one project that's been built in East Pasadena for an affordable project that was last year. And now there's three that are being proposed. And the neighbors went wild when they heard about it. And they sent this notice out to draw people to a design commission meeting. So let me say a little bit about why it's important that affordable housing be built by right instead of discretionary. Now, by right means that housing can be built if it meets objective standards. In other words, standards having to do with height, number of units per acre, etc. So a developer, if they meet these objective standards, can be confident that their project will be approved. They may have to tweak the design and other things, but they don't have to waste time and money on a project that'll just be rejected out of hand. Discretionary means the public can weigh in and delay or derail a project. And this is a problem because affordable housing is often opposed by NIMBYs. So let me talk a little bit about NIMBYs and single-family homeowners. Now, I'll confess, I am a single-family homeowner. Jill and I have a house here in Pasadena. When Jill bought the house, it was worth $140,000. Now it's worth $1.3 million. And what did we do to earn all of that wealth? Basically, very little. Just sleep in the house and do a few minor repairs. But single-family zoning was started about 100 years ago to exclude people of color from white neighborhoods. And today, as I mentioned, 75% of most cities are zoned exclusively for single-family residences, and businesses and multifamily are relegated to a small slice of the city land, only 25%. Now, homeowners tend to feel entitled to have their home values increase faster than the cost of living. This is important to think about because this means that home ownership will automatically become increasingly unaffordable. If it increases faster than the cost of living every year, that means that it will never be affordable to the next generation trying to purchase homes. And I should say that many single-family homeowners feel very self-righteous. They'd see themselves as entitled to this windfall, but they're very critical of developers whom they charge with being greedy because the developers want to make a profit. And as we've experienced many times, NIMBYs resist multifamily and affordable housing, and they believe in many myths that we need to work to dispel. Myths include that affordable housing lowers property values. It doesn't. Sometimes it actually increases property values in the neighborhood. NIMBYs think that affordable housing is ugly and actually it has to meet very high design standards. NIMBYs often believe that affordable housing brings crime, but studies show that actually the opposite is true. So that's why the state has passed bills that require affordable housing to be built by right. And without these bills, affordable housing would be extremely difficult to build. And one of the ways that NIMBYs fight affordable housing is through CEQA, the environmental review. And NIMBYs typically say, oh, there's going to be problems with traffic, with pollution, with sound issues, anything they can think of that will force the developer to have to do a very expensive and time consuming CEQA study. This happened just past few weeks with the project in East Pasadena. They wanted to have a CEQA review because of this project that had 120 units of affordable housing for families. So the California Chamber of Commerce is proposing a new an initiative that would streamline permits for certain kinds of projects like housing, water infrastructure, healthcare facilities, other infrastructure would deemed essential and eligible for a faster process, which would impose new time limits on approval. And these projects would be exempt from environmental review, which is what we would like to see as housing, affordable housing advocates, but it would make it simpler. So seems like a pretty decent initiative. I hope it gets on the ballot and I would vote for it. Now, another thing that raises the cost of housing is downzoning. Downzoning means reducing the number of units that can be built per acre. This makes it difficult to build multifamily and affordable housing. La Cañada, which is right near Pasadena, kind of is a great example of this. It's a community with an average income of $225,000 per person. And they have downzoned most of their city, in some instances, only allowing 1 unit per acre, which means that you can only build a mansion on that property. You can't build anything else. And La Cañada has resisted upzoning, which is the opposite, having more units per acre, to the point where they were unable to get approval for their housing element, which requires every city to look at how much affordable housing is needed in their city and to plan accordingly. Well, La Cañada didn't do that, and so their housing element wasn't approved. And a builder took advantage of this to go directly to the state and get approval for a multifamily project. And the city of Altadena of La Cañada was up in arms about this, but sometimes that's the only way that affordable housing and multifamily housing can be built in exclusive neighborhoods. Also, North Fair Oaks, the area in Pasadena where we have been working for the last 10 years, was downzoned from 48 to 16 units per acre. And this prevented multifamily apartments from being built and stifled development for 20 years. So we've successfully advocated to upzone this area and increase density to 48 units per acre, which allows for 3-story apartments. So now it's possible to build affordable housing, which is a win for the community. So what are ways to create more affordable housing? Through zoning. One way is to just eliminate single-family zoning. Minneapolis did that. It upzoned the entire city to allow duplexes and triplexes in what had been single-family lots, which effectively triples the housing capacity in many neighborhoods. There's a lot of resistance to doing any kind of upzoning in single-family neighborhoods because homeowners tend to be the ones who make contributions to political campaigns, and they're very well organized. So the only way that upzoning typically happens is when it's imposed by the state. And then local leaders are always complaining, you're taking away our local control. And I always responded that by saying, who's in control? In Pasadena, one of our city council members was complaining about Sacramento forcing Pasadena to do certain things around affordable housing. And he said, I love our city just the way it is. We love our city. We love our city just the way it is. And I had to question who is the we in that statement? It's not renters, it's not low income people who are struggling. The we in that statement is the single family homeowners who support him and with campaign contributions. So I think local control makes sense if it means that everybody, renters, low income people, and everyone else, has a say in decision making. And that often doesn't happen, which is why the state steps in. But in Minneapolis, the city did upzone the entire city, and that's a great example for other cities to follow. And another way to have more affordable housing is by increasing density near transit stops and allowing 3 to 6 story buildings. And California's done this through a SB 79. And let me tell you, our elected officials in Pasadena are going ballistic about SB 79. Our mayor brings it up every chance he gets and says what a terrible bill this is because it's going to force our city to have more density. And so a lot of municipalities are trying to figure out how to get around SB 79. But it makes sense, you know, to have apartment buildings near transit stops because that will encourage people to use public transportation. Um, Another simple way to reduce the cost of housing is to eliminate off-street minimum parking requirements. Um, when a builder builds an apartment building, they're required to have a certain number of parking spaces per unit. It can be up to two for a family apartment, 2 or 3 bedroom. It can be one for a single bedroom apartment. But the cost of parking spaces can be anywhere from $50,000 to $80,000 per parking space, depending on whether they're um, uh, underground parking or surface parking. And that really raises the cost of housing. Eliminating off-street parking requirements can reduce the cost of housing by 5 or 10%. And this project I mentioned in East Pasadena only has 55 parking spaces for 120 units because it's 100% affordable. And that makes sense because a lot of low-income people don't own cars, and uh, and some of them who are living there could get a permit to park overnight on the street. Another um, problem that needs to be addressed is investors disrupting the housing market. Um, a lot of investors are purchasing homes and apartments, jacking up rents, jacking up the price of housing. Um, and these investors are interested in short-term profits rather than really improving the permanent housing supply, sometimes turning uh, apartments into short-term rentals, Airbnbs, and parking their wealth in real estate. And this is a problem, and it's complicated, and not sure what the solution is. So we're looking into that. Finally, Prop 13 has been an issue because it exacerbates the state's affordable housing crisis by depriving the city of needed tax revenue. So when the cities can't get taxes through property tax, they can't get income through property tax, they start adding fees. For example, one of the fees in Pasadena is a $20,000 uh, impact fee that's used for parks because the city is not getting enough revenue from housing to provide parks, which are needed by people. And So that adds to the cost of housing. Fees can add up to $150,000 per unit cost to housing, depending on what city you're in. This discourages the residential development. A lot of cities are not eager to have residential development because the cost of providing services for them is greater than the tax revenue that they're receiving from the housing. And they would prefer to have encourage businesses which provide more tax revenue and require fewer services. And finally, Prop 13 encourages homeowners to stay in their homes for as long as possible to the detriment of first-time homebuyers. For example, our home was purchased in 1994 for $140,000, and we pay $3,500 in property tax. If we sold our home at market value, approximately $1 million, the tax for the home buyer would be 1.1% or $11,000. So that's the difference. A new home owner will be paying $11,000 in taxes, whereas we, as a longtime homeowner, only pays $3,500. So what's the solution? I think we need to reform Prop 13, and this has been attempted, but anti-tax groups have opposed any such reform, like Prop 5, and I think we need to keep working on reforming Prop 13 because it creates a lot of inequity and also uh, contributes to the housing crisis here in California. So finally, there's building costs. Building costs keep going up. Labor and land is increasingly expensive, and especially for affordable units. Affordable housing developers receive funds from state and federal sources that require that workers are paid prevailing wages, which is similar to union wage. So a market rate developer can pay workers whatever they want, 20 bucks an hour, 30 bucks an hour. But a affordable housing developer will have to pay $50 an hour or more in order to meet this requirement. And it makes sense. Um, if you're building affordable housing and you pay your workers so little they can't afford to live in the apartments they're building, how is that? How does that make sense? So, and also the unions are very strong and they've required this condition for affordable housing, which I totally approve of, but it does raise the cost. And typically, affordable housing units might be $700,000. And you hear this all the time from elected officials. That's crazy expensive. Market rate units are about 500,000. It's still expensive, but uh, another reason that affordable units are more expensive, but they tend to be smaller projects. Between 60 and 120 units is a typical affordable housing project. So one of the solutions is to scale up with mixed incomes. If if projects are 200 units or more and have mixed income, the cost per unit can go down. And mixed income projects help affordability since higher end projects can subsidize lower end projects. And having mixed income projects also makes sense in terms of uh, equity and social cohesion. You don't want to have projects where everybody is low income in the project. You want to have some some moderate rate units so that it's not concentrating poverty. Another way to reduce costs is through accessory dwelling units. They have a lower unit cost and often rent below market rate. Typically, ADUs are about $400,000 to build, which is cheaper than a affordable unit in an apartment building. And by the way, ADUs were fiercely resisted by municipalities. Pasadena was so opposed to ADUs that they required a $15,000 square foot uh, lot size. They require that ADUs have a two-car garage, that they be 500 feet away from another ADU, that would not be visible by the street. They Pasadena imposed all these. Oh, and then it was a $20,000 impact fee for an ADU. So with all these restrictions, only one ADU was built in 15 years. And then we worked with Senator Wachowski, who wanted to get rid of these kind of obstacles to ADUs. And he asked Jill, who was consulting with him, what is Pasadena doing? I want to know so I can make it illegal. So once all of those restrictions were lifted, um, ADUs are being built now. Here in Pasadena, we usually have about 50 or 100 applications for ADUs every year, and the city has embraced them. And we actually have an affordable ADU program that's received national recognition. So ADUs are a great way to reduce the cost of housing. Also, modular construction reduces cost, and some homeowners in Pasadena are turning to modular homes because they're less expensive and quicker to build. um, Finally, community land trusts. This is where people buy their home, but the land is owned by the trust, which keeps the home permanently affordable. This is something that was started by African Americans in the South back in the 60s. And there are about, I think, 500 uh, community land trusts nationwide. And we started one, the San Gabriel Valley Community Land Trust, and we plan to put our home into this trust. So another problem is simply lack of government funding. Affordable housing has to be subsidized, and billions are flow through state and local programs and tax credits, and yet we have at least a $1.75 billion annual shortfall. So funding comes from state budgets and bond measures, also city and county initiatives like dedicated tax revenue. We mentioned the transfer tax. There are also vacancy tax, housing trust funds. There's a trust fund for Pasadena, Burbank, and Glendale. Um, and that's another source of funds, but the money ultimately comes from the state. And then there's the tax credits and government subsidies from the federal government. Um, Sometimes housing vouchers are given to developers directly instead of to individuals. These are called project-based housing vouchers, and that can lower the cost per unit and make it pencil out for affordable housing developers. So, final thought. Important to keep in mind, affordable housing doesn't get built without advocacy. And how do we advocate? So I want to close my presentation by showing you how we actually advocate. I love this picture. It's a picture of some disreputable looking people. Uh, One of them on the left is homeless, and the other three, you can see myself and two others, are advocates. And we decided to sleep on the sidewalk overnight to dramatize that we want to see affordable housing built at Heritage Square South. It was a vacant lot owned by the city. For decades, it was left vacant, and we wanted to see it used for affordable housing for unhoused seniors. And we were successful. Uh, we had prayer vigils. I was new to this kind of organizing, but I found it very effective to bring together religious leaders to pray, and then they would go to the city council and speak. Uh, I love this sign, Make America Housed Again. This was a campaign in Temple City that was not successful. We were trying to convert a motel into homeless housing, but the NIMBYs fought it. They used CEQA to ultimately kill it. We do a lot of uh, uh, promoting of affordable housing through this Palm Sunday Peace Parade. I built this little display, affordable housing for all, that I carried during the parade. This is a picture of a formerly homeless woman, Dorothy Evans, and she was a drug addict and lived on our streets in Pasadena for about 17 years. And then she got housed and got supportive services, turned her life around, and became a very effective advocate for affordable housing, and actually served on national boards and was flown all over the country where she shared her story and really made an impact. She has unfortunately passed away. When she did pass, All Saints had a memorial service, and the church was packed out. She was a very beloved member of our community. So more pictures of our advocacy work here at in the city hall. We're always bringing people in to advocate. I even brought in that display once to impress our city council members. And this is the most recent campaign we did, the Black Legacy District. Again, we had people with T-shirts and with signs speaking at the city council. And here's the fruits of some of our advocacy. This is Heritage Square South, 69 units of affordable apartments for unhoused seniors. It's been built. It's beautiful. Right next to it is another project that was built years before for low-income seniors, Heritage Square North. And across the street, there's a affordable homeownership project. We're very, very excited about this project, which we advocated for 9 months. We met in front of City Hall at the statues of Mac and Jackie Robinson. We had religious leaders and church groups come to pray, and then we went to the city council and spoke. And after 9 months of meeting with council members, and we convinced them that this vacant lot that had been vacant for 20 years, it's right next to the city hall, should have affordable housing. And here you can see a picture of it in the upper left. That horseshoe that you see is a rendering. What is there right now is a vacant lot. But when it's built, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to look like deluxe apartments. This is a more up-to-date rendering on the right. And it's due to be completed in 2028. I think our city will really be a model for other cities. I'm very proud that our city has affordable housing right next to our magnificent city hall. We're not hiding it off in some remote part of our city. We're putting it in the heart of our city to show that we believe in affordable housing. And I think our city has come to that view because of years of organizing and advocacy have made our city officials realize that they need to support affordable housing because that's what their constituents want. So I'm going to end as I began by emphasizing that all of our work is faith-rooted. We believe that God calls us to help to house our unhoused neighbors, to provide housing security for people who need housing. And the passage from Micah 4 that I mentioned at the beginning is part of our logo. And I'll read it because I think it's this translation of the Living Bible is a great one. God will arbitrate among the nations and dictate to strong nations far away. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nations shall no longer fight each other, for all war will end. There will be universal peace, and all the military academies and training camps will be closed down. And this is the Living Bible paraphrase of Micah. Then it goes on. All will sit underneath their own grapevines, under their own fig trees. There will be no one to terrify them, for the mouth of the Lord of heavenly forces has spoken. So that's our vision, and it's God's vision. And I think we're inspired to do our work because we feel this is God's work. So I want to thank you, ICJP, for your support and I making housing and community happen. Received the uh, George Regas Courageous Peacemaker Award in 2023. And the theme for that year was housing is a human right. And we're very grateful. I'm very grateful, and our organization is very grateful to ICJP for the support that we've received over the years. So thank you so much. Okay,
Wow.
that's my
Thank you,
presentation.
Anthony. This is just, it's both a sobering report of the challenges we face, but a very hopeful report because of how much you've accomplished. Uh, you've done this with the 100 members of your paid staff that do this work every day. Unbelievable what you guys accomplish. So I have a few questions, but I'm grateful there are hands. So we're going to
I
go.
should say that Jill is working like 100 people.
There you go.
Yeah, she's
Um, and just because so many of us have traveled with you in her latest health challenges, how is she doing?
you know, thanks be to God, she's doing really well. Her oncologist said she's 2 months ahead of schedule in her recovery. She's back to almost as much work as she did before she had cancer, and she's really enjoying it. So I'm very grateful to medical science, grateful to God, and grateful to all the people who supported us during our cancer journey.
That's wonderful. I mean, for so many reasons, including your presentation today, please give Jill our very best. So this is a time for questions and answers, and that's what we're going to do for the rest of the meeting. Rick, please.
Anthony, thank you very much because this was very informative, and um, I think one thing you and I talked about this week was there's so many moving parts to creating affordable housing, and there are so many different organizations that have focused on one specific part of it that I think it would be really beneficial for us to maybe look in the third or fourth quarter of this year to try and do a maybe midweek program like this, where we can invite a few different um, housing organizations to speak on what they are doing and do it for maybe clergy and invite community leaders and city leaders as well from different organization, different parts of the state to be involved in this. I wanted to ask you about that proposition on the transfer tax. So is that something that is coming in November? And maybe this is something because we can, as a 501(c)(3), we can
Mm.
advocate uh, a position on it. Maybe that's something that we can key on for the general election.
Well, actually, this transfer tax was approved
Hmm.
by LA voters, so it's been in effect, and it's as I mentioned, generated hundreds of millions of dollars, but it's had some um, negative consequences, and it really needs to be fixed. Now, there are those who want to fix it so it'll be more effective. Others want to basically get rid of transfer tax. So the Jarvis Group is proposing a proposition that would essentially get rid of transfer taxes. They'd be so small that they wouldn't be able to have a significant impact. So that's got to be fought. And if there's a fix that's presented that makes sense, that would be supported, but I'm not aware of one yet.
Okay.
We're still discussing it. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you. Um,
Hold
uh,
on. Yeah. We'll go to Don next.
Thank you, Anthony. It was very timely presentation. I hope I can get some of your information online. Um, we're doing I'm involved in a report right now that's talking about the same issue that you're bringing up. And my question was about RENA, which is what we're dealing with in Santa Cruz County, where the state's mandating that we have 4,600 new housing built for affordable housing in Santa Cruz, and we're only going to hit half of that number because of the restrictions for, Santa Cruz. We have the Coastal Commission and all these things. Do you see RENA or the mandate that the state's putting, forcing communities to do as a help that's maybe going to benefit? We have a hard time thinking it will because there's still going to be 2,000 people in Santa Cruz County, low income people that are not going to be able to have housing, even if we do hit the mark. Do you think RENA is a benefit, or is it just something that's just kind of, because we're running the same issues? Like we had a thing called builder's remedy that the builder can go around uh, the NIMBYs and build anyway, but it's still like we still don't see any light at the end of the tunnel with this. Do you see the state helping at all?
Well, let me first, for everyone's benefit, explain what RENA is. The Regional Housing Assessment is something that every city is required to do every 8 years. And they have to put together a report really explaining what the housing needs are in their city, and then to show what the city can do to plan to address that need. Cities don't have to build affordable housing, but they have to make it possible for affordable housing to be built. So that's the value of RENA. In the past, cities would produce these reports. RENA numbers would be assessed very low usually, and very little happened as a result. But CDC, the state, has now toughened its requirements and imposed some sanctions on cities that aren't really taking seriously their responsibility to plan for affordable housing. I mentioned, La Cañada, for example. And when cities don't take that responsibility seriously and don't plan for affordable housing, the state can take away their ability to, uh, to put restrictions on affordable housing or any housing. And that's called builder's remedy. That's very seldom used. It's never been used before until recently, but I think it's put the fear of God into some municipalities and forced them to make the kind of changes that are needed. Um, and I think it's very important because cities historically have done everything they could to restrict housing, and that's caused the cost of housing to rise. But now they're required to take seriously the housing needs of their community.
Thank you. Let's go to I said it well the last time, Shirzad.
You said it beautifully both times. So thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. It's so clarifying for me. But there's a lot to go through. I did have a question about the ULA, the transfer tax. So you said that there was negative consequences to it. First of all, could you clarify how it's a tax? Explain more about it and what it is, and then also what are the negative consequences? I didn't quite follow that.
Well, the negative consequences is that fewer apartments are being built, very fewer units, because builders are concerned that when they sell their properties, this tax is going to be affect their profitability. And in some instances, some parts of LA have inclusionary, and when fewer units are built, there are fewer inclusionary units that are affordable. So Shane Phillips, a very respected researcher, has demonstrated that the effects of ULA have had these negative consequences. And he was an advocate for ULA, so he hadn't anticipated that this would happen. But you know, the plus side is there's hundreds of millions of dollars that can be used for affordable housing, but for a lot of reasons, that money hasn't even been spent because for about a year and a half, all of this was being litigated in the courts. So the city wasn't going to spend money that might have to be returned. And now that now that the courts have adjudicated this proposition and found it was legal, it's still been difficult for the city to use the money for the purpose for which it was intended. And so far, the results have not been what people had hoped for. But, you know, in the long run, I think it will be a good policy, just needs to be tweaked.
Thank you.
Did I answer your question, Sharon?
Um,
Or
I
do you have
think I
more?
just need a tutorial again on all that you've said so that I understand the language. Inclusionary is just all
Oh,
so new to me.
inclusionary is the requirement that a percentage of a new development be set aside as affordable. So if you have 100 units, inclusionary might be 20% of that would be 20 units would be affordable at certain levels of affordability. So that's one of the best ways we have right now of producing affordable housing. We require builders to put affordable housing into their developments. And the reason this works is because in hot real estate markets, developers are making a pretty big profit. So they can set aside a certain number of affordable units and still make a profit. And I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but actually cities have to do a nexus study to make sure that developers can make a profit when they set aside a certain number as affordable, and then to find the sweet spot of what that number would be, because they don't want to stifle development of new housing. They want to make sure that when it's built, it meets the needs of everybody, not just the elite and the wealthy. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense.
Okay.
So thank you so much. Really
Okay.
appreciate your information.
Thanks.
Thank you both. Swanji.
Yes, and I have heard as objections to um, lowering the requirements for parking on site and for building high density housing that there's not enough parking available on the street and it leads to traffic congestions. What's your experience with that? And is there any good data to counter those impressions?
Well, first of all, as far as traffic, that's always an issue that NIMBYs bring up. And that's why frequently traffic studies are required. And invariably, they show that the traffic issue is not an issue. For example, there was a 350 unit project called Westgate here in Pasadena, big project. And the neighbors were convinced that this would be a huge traffic problem. So they commissioned a company to do a traffic study and concluded it wouldn't be a problem. Well, the city council members were skeptical. So they had a second study done and the same results. So typically, these projects are not creating traffic problems that people are worried about. In fact, affordable housing can reduce traffic issues. When you have a policy like we have in Pasadena that requires that priority be given to people who work and live in our city. So they get first dibs at affordable housing in our city. And that means that they don't have to commute long distances from outside of our city to come here to work. They can live and work in the same city, and that reduces traffic. And as for height, Parking on the street. I personally, I don't see what the problem is. I don't know why. I lived in Culver City. We parked on the street. Uh, and then when they had to do street cleaning, they would say you couldn't park on the street on Thursday, and so we'd move our car to some other part of the street or some other street. It was never a problem, and I didn't feel that having parked cars overnight uh, detracted from my neighborhood in any way. But there are people who feel that way, and they raise this issue. And as for height, I do feel that, there's it would not make sense to have a skyscraper in the middle of a single family neighborhood. But having a 3 or 4 story um, apartment building really doesn't, to my mind, detract from the quality of life in the neighborhood. So it's appropriate size um, that really needs to be considered. With SB4, churches can build on their lots in single family neighborhoods, but it has to be only 1 story higher than the prevailing height in the neighborhood. So those are the factors that need to be considered. We have to be respectful of, you know, the neighborhood character, but it doesn't always have to be 2 story single family homes in neighborhoods. It could be 3 story and 4 story and still have a beautiful neighborhood, in my opinion. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just as a tag along, I lived in New York City for years and parked on the street. I had a car in New York City, which was not common, but we parked on the street. We moved the car around.
Yep.
Uh, Another quick follow-up. Are there any statistics that those who qualify for affordable housing generally use public transportation, don't own a car, so their impact is less than others? In other words,
Yeah.
they use fewer cars.
Right.
Has that been studied?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I don't have the statistics exactly in my head, but I think something like 30% of low income renters have cars. And so when they were planning that project these past years, they were taking into account the studies that have been done. And that's why the state doesn't uh, requires fewer parking spaces for 100% affordable. In fact, they don't require any parking for 100% affordable. And this developer, taking into account the studies that I mentioned, decided that 52 would be the sweet spot that would allow for the uh, parking needs of the residents expected to use their apartment building.
Right. And also that provision of putting housing closer
Yeah,
to public transportation is a
right.
mitigation effort, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. This project is on a bus route, and it's about half a mile from a metro stop. So it's a great. You don't need a lot of parking in that case.
Good, good. Excellent. Jasmine.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you. It was very informative. My question is about the Palm Sunday Peace Parade. What kind of outreach are you doing? I know Pasadena, of course, but I think that would be great to also to inform people about affordable housing and what it is and what it can look like in their communities, in their cities, in their towns. So, what have you been doing for outreach and getting people to the Palm Sunday Peace Parade? Thank you so
Well,
much.
we discontinued that a few years ago. It was started right after the invasion of Iraq, and it went on until about 3 or 4 years ago. And uh, the organizer of that was Bert Newton, and he's now become the executive director of our nonprofit. So we don't have the time right now to do the Palm Sunday Priest Parade like we used to.
Okay. Shazad.
Um, now I forget my question. Let's see. Oh. So the term affordable housing, is there a definition? Because I always wonder, what does that actually mean in terms of cost? My
Mhm.
niece, is trying to find an apartment, and oh my gosh, it's really, it's not affordable.
Right.
So for her, in her category. So what is there like an official definition of what
Yeah.
that means?
Good question. And there is, it's first of all, the simplest way to describe it is if you're paying 30% of your income, then it's affordable to you. So um, now for an affordable housing developer to qualify for various funding sources, they have to meet a standard of affordability. And it's based on the area median income. So for example, in LA area, it's about $90,000 a year is the um, area median income. So that means that to be affordable for that, for those who are making 90,000, your rent would have to be no more than $30,000 a year. Now, so there are different income bands for affordability. There's extremely low, uh, very low, and moderate, and they're based on that area median income. So if you're making $30,000 or less, you're considered extremely low income. If you're making between 30 and 50, I think you're very low. And 50 to 80 is considered 50 to um, uh, 50,000 to 90,000, I think is considered low income. And then there's moderate is up to 120,000. So when developers are applying for funds, they have to make sure that their projects provide a certain number, a certain percentage of units in each of those income bands so that a range of people can afford to live there. And when you apply for affordable housing, you have to show that your income qualifies you to one of these affordable units. So you'd have to show that you are making only $30,000 a year, and then your rent would be $10,000 a year.
Hmm.
Okay. And if you're applying for what's called permanent supportive housing for people who are unhoused, even there, the requirement is that you pay no more than 30%. So if you're on general relief and you're
Mm.
getting $300 a month, then your rent would be $100 a month. Okay. But you would pay something, but it would be no more than a third of your income. So we have permanent supportive housing in our city, and that's we have people who live there who are paying $100 a month rent.
Wow, that's
Okay.
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Makes it very clear.
I'm going to insert a question here. Uh, have you gotten, we used to think that environmental impact reports were a great advance in understanding our communities. They have a lot of support from environmental groups. But your concept of by right that would reduce community involvement. So, how do you rationalize less community involvement and less environmental impact review?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I mean, you know, community involvement is a complex issue. You have a project like the one in East Pasadena, and um, neighbors get riled up, and 100 people show up. But then, there's thousands of other people in the neighborhood who don't show up. Either they don't care or they might even support it, but they don't feel any need to go to city council and make their voices heard. So sometimes the NIMBYs have an outsized influence because of their passion. Um, as far as environmental review, um, invariably when the studies are done, it's shown that new apartment buildings have very little, if any, environmental impact. So they're not really necessary in most instances. And if and the city does do a sort of um, not an in-depth environmental review, but it does look at those issues and takes that into account. And if they feel it does require an environmental impact review, then they can require it. But typically, what happens with NIMBYs is even in a project where there's almost no chance that it'll have an environmental impact, they will try to force the developer to do a environmental impact review, and that takes time and money and raises the cost of housing. Does that make sense? When I'm
It does. It
Yeah,
does. That's
yeah,
helpful.
yeah. And by the
Michael.
way, that project in Golden Motel was almost on the verge of getting approval, but when they required an environmental impact statement, they they missed the deadline for applying for funds, so they had to abandon the project.
Michael.
Yeah, I wanted to share this. We're talking almost 20 years ago at this point, when I was still teaching English as a second language to adults. The printed workbook that came with the textbook we were using had a lesson on the fact that Los Angeles had the least affordable housing in the United States, based on the discrepancy between the average price of a place to live and the average income of someone in Los Angeles County. And the two sides of affordable housing are that housing is a commodity and speculative, and there's nobody gives a damn about luxury housing that they build. There's nobody's out there fighting environmental impacts for these high rises and stuff for and the other side is the income. In other words, if people had more income, housing would be more affordable. And both sides of that has to do with the system of capitalism we live in. I just want to
Absolutely.
emphasize that, and that it's a systemic problem. I appreciate the work you're doing and the efforts to get the churches to build and all the rest of it, but it's going to require a transformation of the nature of the economy of this society to really deal with it. We
Yep.
have to see how, the Rachel Brunke tells a story that one of the things that the Cuban Revolution did is they gave everyone title to the homes they were living in, and just eliminated the whole idea that housing was a commodity that was going to the highest bidder.
Yep.
And I think we need to think about solutions on that level.
Michael, I
Thanks.
couldn't agree with you more. I think that
Yeah.
capitalism has totally failed in this area, and that's why we need to have systemic change. As far as income, even if everybody had what $20 an hour living wage, that wouldn't even meet half the costs of what it requires to rent an apartment
Right.
in LA. It's like you need at least $40 an hour to be able to rent an apartment in LA. So um, income is just so far below what's needed for housing. And it wasn't always that way. There was a time when, like my dad, who was an immigrant, uh, working as a janitor in Princeton University, was able to purchase a home for us back in 1955 for 13,000 dollars. Um, so, there was a time when housing was more affordable, but we've seen it become increasingly unaffordable because it's now become such a commodity and speculative commodity that it's made it out of reach for many, many people.
My question was about, we had a pit count, which is the point of time where we counted all our homeless, and over the years it seems to be fluctuating, but there's a number that I wonder if it's going to help with housing, that still 80% of people in our area homeless are still unsheltered. Do you think this is going to help that number decrease so we won't keep
Yeah.
having 80%? Thank you.
Yeah, I think what it takes to end homelessness is a community effort. When you can bring together the advocates, elected officials, homeless service providers, and all working together to end homelessness, you can produce significant results. And that's true in Pasadena. We had about 11 to 1,200 people who were unhoused on our streets, and we reduced the count to a little over 500 now. So we've reduced our count by over 50%. And I think it's because it's a community effort. And as I said, you can't get elected in our city if you're not for affordable housing. And when we all work together, we can make a difference.
I live in Koreatown, about 4 blocks from where we used to meet in Emmanuel, in between Wilshire and Olympic. So basically a little residential place. At the end of our block is the Bobby Kennedy's set of schools. It's several schools on one huge area that used to be the Ambassador Hotel. And a developer wanted to build a 20 some odd story building right across the street from the Bobby Kennedy's schools. Our mayor was really supportive. His commission looked at it and said, absolutely no, absolutely wrong. And he went against them. And one of the things that just blew me away was that there was this 2-car, everybody had to have access to a 2-car garage. One of the things the mayor wanted was the fact that it was 4 blocks from the train station. But if you have a 2-car space allotted to you, you're not going to use public transportation. And so we fought it. It was just really weird. And my question was, I had a question about that, but I know we're out of time, so.
Well, first of all, I want to thank. I think I'm a favor of affordable housing, but I
Yeah.
think that and that's why I support the inclusionary, which would require a percentage of a new development like this one to be affordable. I don't think that inclusionary applies in this particular case. So the RENA numbers, the Regional Housing Need Assessment, shows very conclusively that we are building more deluxe housing than we need. They consistently, the cities show that we're building way more market rate than we need. What we need are more affordable units. So I'm not always in favor of a market rate housing being developed. I think there has to be a demonstrated community benefit. As for parking, you're absolutely right. Why would you have a 2 parking space requirement if you're right next to public transport? That doesn't make any sense. Can I just add one more thing about parking?
Yeah.
It's shown that when there isn't parking available in an apartment building, people who rent are people without cars. And ultimately, we want to discourage people from using cars, right? I mean, I have 2 cars, and I confess I'm not I'm guilty of that. But there are a lot of people who don't own cars, and I think it's what the direction we need to move in is to encourage people to take public transport. I do take public transport a lot. I think it's the best way to get into LA is to take the metro. But we have to encourage people, and one way to do that is by having fewer parking spaces in apartment buildings.
I remember my question, and that is, do you know how many empty, what of these huge huge buildings that are built around us. How much of the luxury apartments are empty?
That's a good question. I don't have statistics at hand. I know that there's a lot of vacancies, but it's complicated, and I don't have the statistics to discuss that right now.
Well, thank you, Carol Francis. Anthony, we were totally justified in 2023 in honoring you and Jill with a George Regas Courageous Peacemaker Award. And what you've done since then is just amazing and would justify honoring you all over again. You're doing extraordinary work. You know, this is the moment I'd be granting you card carrying membership in ICUJP, but your membership card is one of the oldest. We're so grateful to you and Jill. Anthony, please send us off.
Spirit of love, spirit of justice, and spirit of truth. We're grateful that you have brought us all here together. Continue to guide us, to inspire us, and to challenge us. We also want to lift up to you those who are struggling with housing insecurity and homelessness, people who are struggling with health issues, our dear friend Maggie and Frank Doral, Tracy and Don's brother and Kevin. Surround them with your healing and your love, and bring traveling mercies to Nuri as she travels to Iran. And we lift up the people of Iran and the Middle East during this terrible time of war and uncertainty. Have mercy and guide us.
Thanks, everyone. Please join us next week and every week and this coming week. Do something kind and do something for justice and peace. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.